umaga, magandang hapon, magandang gabi kung anong oras man kayo nanonood. Ito po ang Proyekto Pilipino. Nagbabalik po kami ngayon. After many episodes na ang pinag-usapan natin ang ekonomiya, ang konstitusyon, at ang trabaho, babalik tayo sa isa sa mga paborito naming topic at yun ang edukasyon. At ang konteksto nito ay yung EDCOM 2, of course, na nababalita ngayon at pinag-uusapan sa Senado. Tama ba sa Senado, di ba? Um, Ang guest natin ngayon is actually somebody na nakikita ko madalas. He's the only other Filipino, well, Filipino from the Philippines na professor dito sa University of California at Berkeley. And he's my fellow Atenista here, napaka-small world. Ang guest natin is assistant professor at our School of Education dito sa Berkeley, si Professor Eos Trinidad. Eos, welcome and thank you for joining us dito sa Proyekto Pilipino.
Thank you, Laloy, and thank you to all those who are part of it. Magandang araw sa mga kababayan natin kung saan man kayo nakikinig ito sa ating programa.
Manolo, I haven't heard from you in a long time.
Salamat, Lelo. It's good to be back.
Start, because you were connecting this to previous episodes that we did on education.
Yes, dapat balikan natin because sa huling pagtatalakay natin dito, alam natin na yung K-12 curriculum, may pressure na nanggagaling sa iba't ibang panig na balikan ito at tingnan kung kailangan ito ibahin o bawasan o dagdagan. And nung huli natin pinag-usapan ito, mukha ngang may gagawin ang pamahalaan, and there were several things that were the focus of discussions. Yung isa dito, ano bang lengguwahe ang dapat gamitin? Dapat ba ibalik yung tanggalan ng ilang taon ang basic education? So, Eos, maybe you can tell us ano na ba nangyari? Meron pinag-usapan, may binanggit sila Loy na EDCOM 2. So mukhang meron nga nangyari, and when did this happen and what happened?
Yeah, so magsimula tayo sa EDCOM 2. So this is the second EDCOM. So merong first EDCOM or Congressional Commission on Education. So the first EDCOM was in 1990. So this was before I was even born, no? So nakatapos na ako ng pag-aaral, nakatapos na ako ng PhD. Ngayon pa lang ulit tayo nagkaroon ng Second Congressional Commission on Education. And this is being headed by both the Senate and also the Congress. So you have, for example, Senator Win Gatchalian and Senator Chiso Escudero as part of it, or as the ones leading it from the Senate, and then Congressman Roman Romulo and Congressman Mark Go leading it in the Congress or the House of Representatives. And this came about in 2022 through a Republic Act. And you can say that this was motivated by the dismal results, no, of the 2018 PISA, or the Program for International Student Assessment. If you remember, in the PISA, which is a ranking of different countries, we came dead last in reading for across 79 countries. And then second to the last with science and math. So not very good. And so this, and nagkaroon din ng parang press conference about this. May during the Duterte administration, yung idea ng edukalidad, no? Paano ba natin ma-reform, mababago, may sasaayos ito. Kaya nga nagkaroon ng EDCOM 2. At ang nakakatuwa ay just a few months ago, they came out with the first report from the Congressional Commission. And there are a couple of things that I think are necessary with thinking about this, no? So 6 things to note about it is 4 things are about particular domains in education. So one is early childhood. Next is basic education, so the K to 12. Then on higher education. And then technical and vocational education. So ang EDCOM 2 is not just about K to 12. It really spans it from early childhood up until higher ed and technical vocational education. Also, they also touch upon teacher education, so like the professionalization of teachers, and also systems of governance and financing. How do we finance these? So these are the domains, and maybe we can talk about this one by one para at least alam ng mga manonood natin yung ano nga ba talaga ang EDCOM 2 at ano ba yung mga mapupunan natin tungkol dito.
Yes, I remember nung huling pinag-uusapan natin ito, there was ang isang konteksto dito, there was tremendous public pressure in terms of public opinion na ang mga magulang naman medyo ah, hindi sila kontento sa K-12 because yun medyo natatagalan sila dahil pinahaba yung period of basic education. And there was pressure coming from some members of Congress na gawing K-10 na lang because basically the idea was after 10 pwede ka na mag-vocational, hindi mo na kailangan yung extra 2 years. And if you wanted those extra 2 years, pwede pa rin, but parang optional luxury yon. Was this ever resolved? And um, is the background of everything that's happened this public pressure, or nawala na ba yung public pressure na yon coming from parents?
Alam mo, Manolo, ang nakakatuwa dito, wala silang binanggit sa EDCOM 2 about reducing the 2 years of like
Okay.
senior high school, di ba? Wala yun sa EDCOM 2. Ang pinaka nandun sa EDCOM 2 na pagbabago na sinusuwestyon ay yung mother tongue base. So, di ba, yung first
Mm,
3 grades ay gonna be mother tongue base. So, your original language, no? Your mother
language.
tongue is gonna be used. And one of the suggestions here is to suspend mother tongue based. So, based instruction. So yun lang yun nandun. Walang binanggit tungkol sa K to 10 plus 2.
No,
Yun ang,
yan.
di ba? Na,
So we can assume that debate has been settled, na nag-survive yung K-12.
I think right now there is indication, at least with this report, no, that it has survived.
Okay, so with these two basic questions resolved, so nag-survive for now ang K-12, and mukhang may consensus na isatabi muna yung mother tongue instruction, which is a big debate.
Mhm.
Can you walk us through these 4 areas then, yung
Yeah.
binanggit mo?
Yeah, so let's talk about the 4 areas. So early childhood, basic education, higher ed, and technical and vocational education. So in terms of early childhood, one of the biggest things that they talked about as a problem is stunting. So it's not just about education, it's also about health. And one of the things that is being shown here in this report is that oftentimes it's been very siloed. And so the idea is to integrate more. So integrate with the Department of Health, Department of Social Welfare and Development. So that's one of the themes that's actually across this report. So stunting. Next is access to early childhood education. That not all barangays have early learning centers, that not all barangays actually have qualified teachers. And that goes into that part as well of teacher training and also the salary for these teachers. Kasi ang isa sa mga statistics nila ay 89% of child development teachers hold non-permanent positions and receive an average of 5,000 pesos per month. And that's very, very low. And so one of the things that they really want to support is really the professionalization of this at magkaroon ng my bachelor's degree for this. So that's the thing about early childhood. So it's about access, it's about helping with stunting and also about teacher training, teacher professionalization for early childhood.
Pagdating sa mga teachers, let me just interrupt you for a
Yeah.
second. When it comes to teachers, are those, sino magbabayad ng sweldo nila? LGU ba yon o national government?
I think now currently we have this as LGUs because these are often in the barangay level, but I, I'm not sure with the wording here, and that's actually one of the things I took note of was the budget wasn't clear where things are coming from. Kasi we
Okay.
know that education is very centralized in this country, but there are also other things like the special education fund that's more local.
Mm.
And so, and also we have the barangay centers and barangay learning centers. And then, of course, there's DOH that has a budget for early childhood, and that can be, and also DSWD, and then the 4Ps is part of this. So all of these things, it's not always clear where the money is coming from.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Please go
Yeah,
on.
no, this is good. And maybe what I can do is I can talk about like each of the domains, and then we can open it for some questions
Okay.
every time. So in terms of basic education, three things that emerge as themes was number one, materials. That we have difficulties procuring quality materials. And we've seen that, di ba? May
Mm.
mga material, may mga textbooks tayo na mali-mali or modules, and nakikita natin yan sa social media. So that's one. The next is curriculum implementation. Particularly now that they're actually changing the K to 10 curriculum because we had the 11 to 12 already, K to 10 curriculum. And it's not just the change in the curriculum, it's
What do you mean
also
by that? Na medyo settled na yung curriculum for 11 and 12.
so the curriculum for 11 and 12 is more settled, that you have the different strands and so on. But
Mm.
then with the new administration, we have this K to 10 shift in curriculum. And what we're seeing is it's not just the change in the curriculum, but it's the implementation. How are we supporting teachers in the changes that has to be done? Training in particular is something that they've emphasized.
Ano yung problema sa training? Ano yung napansin nila?
So one of the things that they talked about was that the teachers can't implement them with adequate support. No? So the idea of the curriculum change is i-decongest natin yung curriculum para hindi all at once yung mga topics. Pero the curriculum guides that's being piloted have a lot of implementation because of time constraints. They don't have enough teaching materials and resources, and also facilitators. Kasi when you do this, and I've done this before for DepEd, giving trainings for DepEd teachers is a big endeavor. Like consider it as, I've done one in General Santos City before, and isang buong hotel conference room puno ng mga teachers. So think of that not just in one city but in other cities as well. So that's where we need to be able to support our teachers. So number one is the materials, and then how do you help the teachers? And then the third is yung pinag-uusapan na natin kanina, yung tungkol sa mother tongue instruction.
Ano nga
And
bang
that's
literature? Ano
consensus.
bang speaking of yung mother tongue, because initially I think finorward yung mother tongue yan dahil ang assumption is mas madaling matuto ng sciences, math, particularly yung STEM, kung ginagamit yung mother tongue. In other words, yung wika na ginagamit sa bahay habang lumalaki ka. So, kung ano man yon, Ilocano man yon, Tausug man yon, yun yung gagamitin para aralin yung STEM. May mga pag-aaral na ba na lumalabas na nag-assess kung effective nga ba itong mother tongue education?
Sa ibang ah, sa ibang mga bansa, may mga pag-aaral tayong nakita, and that's why we took on mother tongue based instruction. Dito sa Pilipinas, ang mahirap ay pag nagbibigay ng policy ang DepEd, madalas sa buong bansa ito agad. Hindi nagkakaroon ng ang tawag natin randomized controlled trials. So wala masyadong pag-aaral na mayroon tayong experimental group at control group. So at least sa pagkakaalam ko, wala tayong ganun. Pero ang alam natin from the literature ay at least sa ibang bansa, ang mother tongue ay preferred. But then also, ang kailangan dito ay implementation, no? At yung training ng mga teachers.
So can you summarize for us ano yung mga naging dahilan na para tanggalin isa itong policy na ito? Kung wala tayong may tuturing pag-aaral na ginawa, ano naging basehan ng rekomendasyon na ito?
Alam mo Manolo, personally hindi ko alam eh. Kasi minsan ang mga desisyon ay mas political.
Well, this is the next question I had.
Yeah.
We have to look at this now because nung huling pinag-usapan namin ng topic na ito, binanggit ko that there was pressure from parents. And because of this, there was a temptation, let's say, on the part of some elected officials na basically patulan yung hinihingi ng mga magulang dahil sila ang botante, di ba?
Mhm.
Whether it was good overall or not, or justified or not for education. So, looking at this process as it's unfolded, can you say that it's been relatively unpoliticized, or is it a mix of both? How would you?
I'll talk more generally about the EdCom 2. It's a very professional endeavor and supported by both the House of Representatives and also the Senate. Nakakatuwa din dahil nakikita mo yung pag-usbong ng mga issues. Pero sasabihin ko rin later on, ano yung mga hindi umusbong? At yun I think yung importante dito eh. Ang pag-usapan din yung mga hindi naisabi. Isang example nito o isang halimbawa ay ang issue ng compensation or salary ng public school teachers. Walang pagkabanggit nun dito sa EdCom 2 report.
Wow. That's huge.
The most discussion of salary was the salary for early childhood,
Early
but not
childhood, as
for
you
public
mentioned.
school teachers in particular. And we have to put this in perspective that this is the first report, no? And hopefully the people who are listening are also, or the people who have written this or part of this can also listen to what we're talking about na hindi nabanggit. Baka napag-uusapan pero hindi lang nailagay. Pero when you talk about salary kasi it's also especially when you have a budget and it will need certain resources, that's always political. So that I think is one thing. So what gets into the report and not into the report is the political process, but that these things emerge, I think is a good first step. Also, nabanggit ni Leloy na kaming dalawa ay nandito sa Estados Unidos, nandito kami sa University of California, Berkeley. At kung ikukumpara ko ang Pilipinas dito sa US education, ang nakakatuwa sa Pilipinas ay hindi mo talaga wala masyadong partisanship, no? O ang mga decisions natin hindi base sa kung anong political faction tayo. Ah, Karaniwan ang explanation dito ay dahil marami tayong political parties. Pero hindi mo rin makikita dito sa report na to na mayroong liberal camp or conservative camp. Ang nakikita mo actually ay ano yung mga pagkakapare-pareho na gusto nating makamit. At yun ang medyo refreshing para sa akin kasi pag inaaral ko ang US education, laging merong Republican versus Democrat,
Mhm.
liberal versus conservative. Pero dito, at least dito sa report na to, at sa mga conversations natin sa mga education experts sa Pilipinas, hindi mo talaga makikita itong partisanship.
Okay, so
And I
now
also,
let's go to
actually,
the
that's a good question. Why do you think? Kasi meron namang partisanship yung lipunan natin, yung politika natin
Mhm.
ngayon. Pero bakit tayo nagkakaisa dito?
Yan actually ang gusto kong sunod na research question eh. Na bakit may mga countries or may mga bansa na nagkakaisa ang mga tao pero ang US grabe ang pag ah, grabe ang political polarization, no? Specifically sa education. Siguro ang ang makikita ko maraming explanation. Isa siguro ay talagang the quality first eh. So it's not just about uh it's not just about the difficulties of uh kumbaga we need to get to that quality first and be able to resolve that. So that's one. Next is I think there's something here that Philippine society is a little more homogeneous. So there's really no race to think about or the concept of race, which is big here in the United States, is a big thing to think about. Also, the biggest inequalities in Philippine education is private versus public schools. And that that's taken as something given, parang obvious for people. But maybe that's where it can where divisions can come.
Okay, so now we're going to the third of your
Yeah. So the third one is about higher education. So one of the things they actually put as statistics was we have comparatively, compared to other low and middle income countries, high enrollment rates for tertiary education. So we're around 35% of our college going population are actually in college. However, one of the things we have as well is we have a high attrition. So in as much as people enroll in college, people also drop out of college for many reasons. So that's one of the things that we want to be more mindful. The second is that we actually have uh, the free higher education. But one of the things that they've realized from having free higher education through state universities and also local universities and colleges is that it can sometimes be not sustainable. And it might also not be targeting the ones who need them most. Because the ones who need them most are probably living in municipalities and in cities that do not have their own local colleges. So may inequality din na nangyayari doon. And then the last thing, so those two things are about access. The third thing is about quality higher education. So ang CHED may tinatawag silang Center of Excellence and Center for Development. Ibig sabihin, kung ikaw ay Center of Excellence for Entrepreneurship Education, ibig sabihin maganda yung curriculum mo and so on. Pero only 182 out of more than 2,000 higher ed institutions have centers of excellence and development. And so there are many schools that are lagging behind. And so trying to increase that and trying to provide more opportunities for centers of development and centers of excellence to emerge, especially in our provincial schools, so that people don't have to go and travel to Manila or to Cebu or to Davao in order to get quality education. So those three things, two about access for students, and the third about quality in higher ed.
Ang tanong ko lagi sa higher ed, kasi alam ko dito sa US ang lagi pinag-uusapan, is higher ed worth it? Sulit pa ba dahil ang mahal-mahal ng higher ed, tapos nababaon ka sa utang, and then if you don't go to the best schools naman, hindi naman mababawi ng sweldo mo yung ginasta mo at yung inutang mo as a higher ed, as a student, as a college student. Do some of those observations apply to the Philippines? And sulit pa ba mag-aral sa kolehiyo sa Pilipinas ngayon?
Right now, I'd say yes, sulit pa rin na mag-aral sa kolehiyo. But the returns to education are not as high as before. So when more and more individuals have opportunities, of course, that's good. But also, what are the jobs that are being created with that? And ano yung mga requirements for that job? So the more professional careers, like whether you're a lawyer, doctor, and so on, the returns to education are still high. But your usual office professional, that might be where it's not as clear how much more the effect is of higher education.
Okay, can you walk us through that a bit more? That leaves me a bit confused. So,
Yeah.
ideally, yung college degree mo dapat susi ito for a better life. But we're finding that the course you take today might not be relevant soon after you graduate because the rate of change for many jobs is so high. So there's even a big debate now whether you really need a college degree for many jobs out there today when you should be taking qualifications for all sorts of competencies that change over time, so you have to keep studying your whole life. So is that what's happening here, or something even more profound?
I think there's that. And also, you have certain jobs that are also going elsewhere, either because of competition from other countries, whether that's manufacturing job, or just from technology. No, one of the clear examples is business process outsourcing or call centers. Before, that was a big booming industry here in the Philippines, but one of the things that has changed is that you have AI or artificial
AI, yeah.
intelligence who can pick up your voice and say, and this is how they usually start now. When you pick up your phone and maybe you have a complaint, you'll have an automated voice that says, press number 1 if you did this or whatever. Hindi na siya immediately to a call center agent. So that's one example. And there are many other jobs. Now, there's also, interestingly, an underground economy for artificial intelligence. by that, you have individuals being hired to click, does this look like a
Yung
cat
for
or not?
to prompt
Yeah.
it, yeah.
So in a way, artificial intelligence, and this is actually, there's research on this. Artificial intelligence is being trained on Filipinos who are making decisions on whether something is this or that. Kasi that's what artificial intelligence does. And so, in as much as there are old jobs that are being taken away, there are new jobs that are being created. And those new jobs, we don't have enough knowledge about how they might be in higher ed. One example as well, you want more teachers in early childhood, but you don't have as many universities that are offering early childhood education. One of the things you can do is to provide a degree for that. But the only way for that degree to be worth it is if you increase the salary more than 5,000 a month. Kasi right now, parang considered as barangay worker sila. So, it's more a stipend
Mm.
rather than as full salary. And so professionalizing that profession is something that goes hand in hand with making this worth it.
Walk
Carlo,
us through what happens after this. So, let's assume na ito yung first draft nung EDCOM 2 and that let's say it will go through a process of sa buhay ng kongreso na ito until 2025, it will maybe go through, version 1, 2, and 3 before may final report. Then what happens?
teka Manolo, nakalimutan natin yung yung TESDA, yung technical education,
Ay, oo nga pala. Sorry,
Yes.
yung
And
huling ano.
yung
yeah,
vocational and technical education.
the vocational is interesting kasi ang makikita natin sa vocational ay talagang nag-increase ang access to vocational education. So, for example, in 1991, just around 300,000 students were able to participate in technical vocational education. But by 2020, it's 2.3 million. And that's a big increase, mainly because of all the things that have happened with TESDA, all right,
TESDA. Okay.
and also industry partners. So, but even if you have all of these changes, a lot of these are very community based and do not have the partnership with industry. And so that linkage is always difficult. Also, many of these are lower skilled. So mechanics and so on, rather than those that are more, and these are called NC1 or NC2. So National Certification 1, National Certificate. So lower in skills and so lower compensation as well. What is being suggested is that you have higher skilled, you have more training that's more higher skilled, again, to make this worth it. So those have been the things, again, early childhood, basic education, higher education, and teacher education. Now, Manolo, to your question about where does it go from here?
Mm.
This is more like a framework. Hindi ito isang batas. So ang K-12, di ba? Isang batas yun.
Mm.
This is a framework for how, or a roadmap, kumbaga, for what's next. And so under each of these priorities, that's where they will create laws. Doon sila gagawa ng batas. And you have a bicameral commission that says, these are the things that are important for us, or at least important for us to think about. Now, ano yung mga batas na pwede nating magawa? At nagsisimula na yung mga batas na yon, tulad ng batas nga na pag-suspend ng mother tongue-based instruction. May batas din tungkol sa nutrition intervention na nilagay sa 2024 budget and so on. So may mga batas, hindi siya isang batas lamang, kundi may mga iba't ibang batas. In terms of mga bagong, siguro fearless forecast, kung ano yung mga mangyayari, sa palagay ko ay magkakaroon ng agency na magko-coordinate ng mga bagay-bagay na ito. Kasi ngayon, kasalukuyan, early childhood and basic ed are with Department of Education,
DepEd.
DepEd, no? And then higher ed is with the Commission on Higher Education. And then you have technical vocation with TESDA. And then you have all of these auxiliary agencies like DSWD, also PRC or the Philippine Regulatory Commission, and then the Department of Health. And so a coordinating body is, I think,
A
logical next step.
kind of cluster.
Yes, a cluster to bring these together. I think that's what
And a logical
one of the
conclusion
things.
of what's happening.
What's that?
Parang logical conclusion nitong report na to because this report parang pinagsasama niya yung lahat at sinasabi niya you need an overarching framework. So if you need an overarching framework, might as well have an overarching agency or cluster or something that would be able to oversee the process or coordinate the process.
You know, Leloy,
Mhm.
sorry. This made me realize, Leloy, look, over the past 3 years, we've been talking about parts of all of these things. Tatandaan mo, Leloy, like we were talking about stunting, we were talking about basic education, we were talking about vocational. And if it's taken us 3 years for us on the outside to be looking at each of these and tying them together for our audience, imagine it's pretty good that the congressmen and the senators have been able to do it.
Yeah,
Alam mo,
and this is
they're doing their homework.
Yeah, and this is great. This is really all props to work of the committee, and I have a lot of friends in that committee. So you have Carol Yee, for example, who's executive director here. Of course, our good senators and Congress men and congresswomen have been working hard for this, and for this to happen within just a year is really amazing. So, but there are, I think, things that still need to be fleshed out. So a couple of things na napuna ko, no,
Mm.
is number one, it was very focused on what is happening in the government side, but not about the participation of private schools and private institutes of higher education. Considering that we have almost or around 12,000 private schools, Catholic schools, international schools here in the Philippines, that was very minimally touched upon on this framework. And so again, maybe something to think about. We
And
talked
I know
earlier.
you're also researching civil society organizations that are invested in education. So hindi rin sila nabanggit gaano sa EDCOM report.
Well, I have a question about this, by the way, Eos,
Hmm?
because I know someone who, for 30 years, they were involved in an aspect of education which was training the teachers in values because they came from the point of view that one effect of martial law was to remove um, the public school teaching as a meritocracy because that was an effect of dictatorship. Now, they spent 30 years trying to do values education for public school teachers to get them out of the obey and mentality. But after 30 years, they had to wrap up their work because they all got old. They all had to retire. There was no one to replace them. And so I've always viewed that as a kind of um, warning about civil society. The generation that made it very vibrant in the 80s and 90s is not often finding a successor generation. So Are you studying this? Is this a wide problem or just an
Yeah,
isolated one?
it is a wide problem, and it's difficult because you want civic participation, but civic participation really depends on the people that you get, and sometimes it's a generational thing. In as much as you have this generation in a way closing up shop, no, you also have a new generation of other individuals who are doing other things. So one example is Teach for the Philippines, where they place teachers for 2 years in public schools. And they also go to more central government offices to serve. So there's that. You've probably heard of different volunteer services that have been on and off. But the problem with nonprofits is it's not institutionalized, it doesn't have a national budget, and so it's always dependent in terms of survival and sustainability financially on where they can get money. And so that's always the biggest problem with nonprofits if it's not institutionalized with central government. Also, how does the government view nonprofits? Are nonprofits partners? Are nonprofits uh, critical, or are nonprofits providing alternatives? I think one of the nice things about this report was that they acknowledge, actually, it's in the acknowledgement, you have nonprofits there. So you have Philippine Business for Education, or PBED, for example. We have individuals here from Philippine, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, and so on. Oh, interestingly too, they acknowledge assistance from the USAID,
Hmm.
or the US assistance for international development, also the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Australian government. So they have all of these partners, even from outside the country, but none specifically about what actually should nonprofits, should private schools, should private institutes of higher education contribute to EdCom 2, or to just more largely Philippine education?
Carlo,
Well,
I haven't heard from you today. Mista
Di-
kita. I wonder
na,
kung ano tingin mo dito sa EDCOM framework, and are you optimistic, like did AOS make you feel optimistic as well?
no, actually, Leloy, the whole time, that's why I'm quiet, is because medyo, this really means a lot to me, because yung anak ko, yung eldest ko, just
Yeah.
graduated on Saturday from so he finished college, and all these things that we're discussing is I'm living it. I'm living it because these are exactly the conversations that I'm having with him. Ano ang ibig sabihin ng degree mo? Saan ka pupunta ngayon? Ano ang plano natin? Um, it's very it's very hard, no? I mean, Eos, thank you first for laying out ano yung problema na nakikita natin. And babalikan natin, why is there an EdCom? Kasi one, we had results that kulela tayo in some areas. So let's not forget that. And we have to always understand, Leloy, what we're talking about here right now is a holistic approach to a very complex problem. So siguro yung mga viewers natin, ba't itong ganitong problema hindi na-discuss, itong ganitong problema hindi. It's hard because when you're looking at a holistic approach, there are obviously some things that hindi natin matatamaan eh. But ang ganda nung finrame mo, Eos, na let's take it from the beginning to the end. Kasi sabi mo, Lela, na my son's life flashed before my very eyes. And
Kasi inisa-isa yung mga periods ito.
isa-isa lahat ng naging problema namin ng misis ko, na ano namin, and at the end of the day, ang ano sa akin is, one thing that struck to me is, why nung graduate ako nung college, half of my friends opted to migrate, the other half stayed here. And the number one, I would ask them, ano yung reason mo for migrating? Ba't kaya alis? Okay naman yung natin dito. The number one thing two things actually always, ito anecdotal to, but two things constant sa group of friends ko. One, ang mahal ng education dito. Access and affordability of good quality education. And that's why they're opting to go to a country that can provide good quality education for much less. And second, healthcare. That's two things. So it's such a big problem, and now you're saying, because here in Proyekto Pilipino, we're always tying it with quality of life, no? How do we tie this to, I'm looking at it now as an employee of a multinational. Yung mga problema na nakikita natin, tama yung sinasabi niyo, sometimes you don't even look for specific degrees, but like in our cases, when we hire, because when we look for employees that are Filipinos, we look at one, their maturity level, their critical thinking, and these are things that parang napaka-abstract, no? But in truth, these are the things that employers are looking for, other than just technical stuff, because technical skills, you can learn it on the go. So anyway, Leila, that's the reason why I've been so quiet, because all these things are being processed by my minds. And Eos, thank you for mabigat. So, but it's a very daunting problem that we have, kasi at the end of the day, huwag natin kakalimutan, kaya tayo pinag-usapan to, kasi nga, kanina tinanong natin, how come we're not so polarized? It might be because the problems are so obvious.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
so obvious that there's no debate about it. So it boils down to,
Kulela tayo sa PISA, wala, ganun talaga.
it all boils down to implementation now.
Hindi, but I mean, I wanted to add here, based on what Carlo and you are saying, Leloy, also one thing that was happening dun sa mga previous shows natin, remember, one instinct nung lumitaw yung kulela tayo sa mga standardized testing, wag na tayo sumali sa testing na yun. Remember that? Remember that? That was a serious, seryoso, kasi at ang daming dahilan. So, sa akin, that's one reason why I was medyo impressed na talagang hinarap nila ang problema. And then, mukhang iniwasan naman nila yung mga easy choices that don't solve anything, di ba? So I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah. And maybe I
think,
can.
well, actually, it's a good place to close. We need to close the episode. So I'm going to ask Eos for your closing thoughts, and I suppose that's where you were going anyway. But please go ahead.
Yeah, so three things that I want to close. The first is, this report is a 400-page report on our system. One of the most impressive reports I've ever seen, one of the most impressive government documents I've ever seen. A lot of people put a lot of hard work into it, thought very holistically about our education system. So I want to just give them credit. Talagang, and it draws out very clear priorities, very clear things we can do. So that's number one. Number two is, there are, of course, things that I hope can be there in maybe the next report, or things to think about. Like, as I said, what's the connection of private schools, private nonprofits, higher education institutions, the role of salary and budget, and where things are coming from, what actually happens in the classroom, and this last thing, which is about, how do we define quality education? In as much as this report showed all the things we can do, it never really defined what are the goals. What is our definition of quality education? Is it that we're going to be like 10 points in PISA? Is it just about like foundational math and reading, literacy? Is it about students having, 80% access to higher education? We have to be clear what those outcomes are, what those goals are. And so these are things that I hope those who have written this and those who are part of this can be can take on as part of the conversation. What are the goals that we want? The third is that we all have a role to play here. For parents, for example, having high expectations for your kids is important. For teachers, they have a very concrete and proximal ability. So this isn't just about what the government should do. It's also what each and every one of us, I as a researcher, my friends who are working tirelessly in the government sector. I think these are the different things that can really help our education. And it won't happen in a year. It won't happen in just 3 years. It won't happen with just this administration. It's a long process, but I think we're on the right starting place.
Manolo, any final thoughts?
Sa akin, I think yung konsepto ng puhunan, ang kinabukasan natin, ang puhunan natin para sa kinabukasan natin bilang bahagi ng proyektong Pilipino, ang pagtatalakay ng mga nosebleed na topic katulad nito. Day in and day out. So, katulad ng binanggit ko sa simula nito, marami tayong tinalakay dito sa Proyekto Pilipino na makikita lang natin ang totoong halaga at paano makikinabang tayong lahat sa pagtatalakay nito pagkatapos ng mahabang panahon, pag medyo hinug na ang ating kaalaman o ang ating kapasidad upang talakayin ang mga bagay na ito. And yun ang kahalagaan ng sinasabi nilang civil society and civics, na kailangan we learn together, we discuss together, and then we come up with solutions together na hindi ningas kogon.
Carlo?
Sure. Lele, balikan ko yung, kasi last Saturday lang yung graduation ng anak ko. So the speaker there was kilala at magaling na historiador, si Dr. Ambet Ocampo. And he tied his
Lasalyano nga palang,
so he tied his talk. Of course, his favorite topic, si Jose Rizal, and you know what he was as a student. Pero tinanong ako nung asawa ko, what did I think of the talk? And I immediately I said, it's pretty good. But then the more I thought about it, medyo siguro bias kasi ako kasi ano rin ako, idol ko rin si Jose Rizal, tapos I love history. But then the more I thought, kasi yung wife ko was saying, parang hindi siya suitable for the occasion. And the more I thought about it, it had an interesting thought, no? And it parang, and this is not hindi lang it's not an isolated case kasi narinig ko na to in other areas na we always expect our students to go out there and be mga modern heroes, mga bayani na ayusin natin lahat ng problema ng lipunan. And parang napag-isip ko, parang di ba parang napaka-unfair nun? Na lahat ng yung burden na yon binibigay natin sa ating mga estudyante na ayusin nyo yung mga problema ng ating lipunan kasi you're in a position to do so. Pero sa akin parang napag-isip ako, it shouldn't be that case. It should be, I know in previous episodes, Leloy, ikaw, we always talk about do the small things. The small things, even saying good morning or hello, looking at your fellow citizen in the eye when they pass by you or open the door. Kamusta ho kayo? Magandang araw. Simple things, as simple as making the right choices, which can lead to bigger choices such as electing the right leaders. And it all starts with education, no? Kasi parang we always ask them to do these gigantic things, but we should just ask them to do small things that are right. And the best thing we can do that is to empower them. And how do we empower them to do these small things? Is to create that right framework. And that is exactly what AOS is talking about. We're looking at it. We're trying to create the right framework for education that empowers our students. And hopefully, siguro, hindi na nangyari sa panahon natin, Leloy, but nakikita ko ngayon yung mga anak ko, hopefully, they're empowered to do that, to do the right decisions, and hindi sila natatakot na gawin yon.
Si Carlo, nagtitimpino muna, tahimik na tahimik. Yung pala may tinatagong pusok. Ang daming pusok na lumabas. So, ang daming
Ang
pills
ang
pala.
dami ko nang binayaran, Leloy.
Oo, ang daming pills. Pero, I mean, that's something that can really only come from a parent na meron ganung klaseng investment. Pero, hopefully, we can share in yung pusok ni Carlo kahit tayo mga hindi mga parents, because even though we don't have children, lahat ng mga batang Pilipino, in a way, kailangan nating kalingahin as if we were their parents as well. Because that's the point of Proyekto Pilipino. And yung natuwa ko dito sa episode na to, we usually try to pair academics up with government people kasi kami mga academic, pasensya na, napaka-cynical namin na tao. And this is one of the few episodes where we got an academic, a very critical academic, and he's actually impressed with what the government does. So kung kaya mong kumbinsihin si Eos Trinidad na napaka-critical na academic that there's something going right, my God, dapat talagang ngumiti tayo. So we've had a lot of really depressing shows, lalo yung show about something, but this is one of those good shows, and it's so nice to give our viewers good news naman. So sa ngalan po ni Father Tito Kaluwag, ako si Leloy Claudio, kasama ni Manolo Quezon at ni Carlos Santiago. Maraming salamat, Professor Eos Trinidad, Berkeley School of Education. Sa susunod, sa ulitin po, this is Proyekto Pilipino.
Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Poverty in the country has become a never-ending cycle passed down through generations as continued neglect, disempowerment, discrimination, and dehumanization become the norm in these communities. In 2014, Alay Kapwa Program and Caritas Italiana launched the Alay Kapwa Integral Evangelization, Resource Mobilization, and Livelihood Development Program. This sought to implement the self-help group program in 4 partner pilot dioceses: Diocese of Tagum, Diocese of Naval, Diocese of Ilagan, and the Apostolic Vicariate of Puerto Princesa. The self-help groups is an informal association of poor women in these communities, composed of 15 to 20 members. They voluntarily come together to make small, regular savings contributions over a few months until they have enough capital to begin lending to needy members.
During the orientation of the SHEG program, inaangkin nila yung programa sa kanila rin eh. It is very opposite when it comes to the outlook of the dole out kasi galing sa kanila talaga. Yung puhunan sa kanila, hindi sa ibang tao.
SHEG has a broad anti-poverty agenda. This includes developing leadership abilities, skills training in micro-entrepreneurship, improving households, partnerships with schools, and building strong communities.
Tinulungan po ako ng mga SHEG member ko. Nagkaroon ako ng puhunan po, kaya ngayon nagluluto na po ako ng mani. Mahirap po dati kasi nagsasaka lang po kami. Sa isang araw 150, 200 ganun po. Dito sa pagmamani po isang sako po nakukuha po akong kumita ng 2,000 po.
SHEG allows the poor to find more opportunities to serve others, transforming them into better Christians and human beings. Parish priests have seen the deepening of faith among their respective parishes as a result of active participation in the SHEG program among parishioners.
Dati, madalas kami nag-aaway, gawa kami siya na walang pera. Ngayon, nakasali na kami sa SHEG at binigyan kami ng Panginoon ng blessing, nakahiram kami at nakakain na rin kami. Gawa ng SHEG. Malaki talagang tulong yun sa amin. Hindi na kami nag-aaway, nagmamahalan na kami forever. Dati hindi pa kami nakasali ng SHEG, sa isang taon kaisa lang kami nagsisimba. Ngayon, nakasali kami linggo-linggo na.
As members of self-help groups form a bond with each other, they find meaning and purpose in their lives. As they start sharing their problems with the group, social issues are discussed and they develop trust. They then become empowered to create solutions based on each other's needs.
Blackout kami kasi talagang sunog lahat. Yung mga listahan namin, yung pera namin, sunog yun. Awa ng Diyos ay nakakabangon na rin kami. Yung aming mga miyembro na walang bahay, ngayon ay nakakatayo na rin.
Parang nawalan kami ng pag-asa. Na-discourage talaga yung mga tao. Pero sa awa at tulong ng Panginoon, nabuo muli kami.
Naranasan man namin yung hirap dahil sa sunog na yon. Pero sa ngayon dahil sa aming pagtutulungan, pagmamalasakit sa bawat isa, ay unti-unti na po kami nakabangon.
The program employs specific strategies intended to liberate the poor, especially women. By teaching them to save on a regular basis, SHEG seeks to empower them to become their husbands' more effective partners in developing the economic strength of the family.
Akala ko wala na akong iba gagawin sa buhay kung hindi sa bahay lang. Pero nung dumating yung SHEG, nadagdagan pala yung tungkulin ko sa community namin. Nagtitrain na ako sa ibang community kung paano ibuo ang SHEG, paano mag-savings, at saka sa mga bata din. Tinutulungan namin yung mga bata, paano sila mag-savings, saan pupunta yung pera nila. Kaya noon, yung mga bata, kahit ano-ano lang gagawin nila sa pera. Ngayon, pagdating ng linggo, nagsisavings na sila, malaki na yung sinisavings nila.
And although the project was initially designed for women, it soon became apparent that there was a need to include and organize men's groups as well. Soon thereafter, male members were introduced to the SHEG formation.
Isang malaking pasasalamat ang nais naming iparating sa Caritas Italiana through Alay Kapwa program ng CBC Pinasa. Dahil naging daluyan ng buhay, dugtungan ng pagmamahal at ng kapatiran ang SHEG program na dinala ng Alay Kapwa program dito sa aming diocese.
Empowerment through SHEG has proven to be effective. The social development approach in the grassroots level has helped in giving purpose and meaning to those whose lives were lived in uncertainties and constant degradation. Because of this empowerment, they have taken control of the direction of their lives, and the communities were driven to meet goals to help each other in combating poverty.